Welcome to the CPTM Smart Partners Hub in London, and I welcome once again to Moses Nkundwe from Tanzania, from Dar es Salaam, from Department of DIT, and or is DTI? It's DIT. You'll explain.
Yeah.
And obviously, welcome to Oliver Aram, founder of Chainvine, who is both Sweden and UK,
Yes.
and elsewhere. But the two of them are part of and leading the development of the emerging digital inclusion initiative, which is the main support initiative within the Smart Partnership movement in the last 5 years or so, stimulating and informing central bank governors for their financial inclusion, Bureau of Standards, statistics, national visions, etc. So what we thought that today we would do is to give you a very quick feedback from a most informative and timely think tanking led by the governor, called by the central bank governors, with the participation both of the hub and virtually from a number of very senior members of our group. We received quite a number of feedbacks while things were happening last Thursday on the 28th of June, and they were from not necessarily only those who are involved in digital landscape type of issues, but also from diplomats, from Secretary General of ACP from Canada, etc., which meant that the CPTM's major objective, which is to engage at the interface so that implementation is happening real time, both governors, preoccupation of heads of government, etc., which makes things happen, is taking place. So, but there were always a lot of dimension that came out during the 3-4 days, and one was that, and we chose a few things to mention. One was that probably one of the best useful discussions that took place was before Thursday, which was on a Wednesday, when leading figures, minister from Lesotho and leading figures of Swaziland and former deputy prime minister, etc., they were around, including others, and we tried to actually rehearse for the next day in relation to how would people understand this incredible confused concepts, interests which go with it, and different disciplines, if you can call them disciplines, or yeah. So it was very useful Wednesday, because one could go down to the basic, and that has to be understood what is basic, yeah? And then extremely useful the interaction between individuals who are highly responsible of the British national statistics, including the digital companies like Oliver, who is now in British context, or responsible with the newly formed in Bank of England units, hubs, either of fintech or data visualization, or the highest responsibility that the head of Financial Times data visualization has very recently in relation to trying to communicate the evolution as it happened, or evolution as is taking place, which influences. So, and of course, on the top of everything else were the governors. Those were here, those were not here, but the governors from Southern Africa and Eastern Africa, small islands, they expressed and they reviewed whereabout and what is it all about in financial digital inclusion currently. What are the trends? And then there was, as far as possible, avoiding the excluding the governors and others from the lexicon of crypto taxonomy, for instance, trying to focus on the kind of regulatory frameworks that need to be put in place, so in addition to standards, yeah? And then, obviously, the impact that digital and data makes on economic statistics, and what is economic statistics as is evolving now. Now, these are not in abstract, these are not university-type discussions. These are highly responsible and influential real-time comments and discussion that are taking place, and that is one thing that everybody needs to realize. These are not just odd discussions and conferences. And of course, Friday morning, all these have been put together as and try to see what has not been discussed, what should be discussed. But Oliver and Moses will mention very, very quickly, for instance, about some of the things which we need to emphasize in the context of last week for the future. One is, Oliver, maybe I shouldn't mention, you just mention, in case you forget the dimension, I will remind you.
Right, you're talking about the whole talk around blockchain. Why are we talking about
blockchain?
So
what is really what needs to be known?
So I think
half a minute.
In half a minute. So distributed systems have been around for 20, 25 years or so. The reason we're all talking about blockchain, and we can't forget this, is that the whole conversation has been stimulated by the cryptocurrency Bitcoin. So when talking about blockchain, it didn't just come out of nowhere. It was essentially stimulated by the cryptocurrency called Bitcoin. It solved a couple of issues in digital currency, one being that of the double spend. So essentially when people do sort of try and separate blockchain from Bitcoin, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. We're all here because of Bitcoin.
As easy as saying
what is
an apple, what is an orange.
Exactly, and we have to remember that Bitcoin has been quite explosive in all forms. First as a digital transfer of value between one another, a peer-to-peer, and now for driving what is quite a huge industry in terms of blockchain.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and of course the developments in these different these different dimensions are bringing in clusters of disciplines and qualifications, so to speak.
Exactly.
And Moses, if you can kind of quickly just mention the kind of disciplines and kind of
Thank you, Mihaela.
that we expect around prime minister, heads of government, leaders of banks or national statistics. They need what kind of
Exactly.
maybe you mentioned what did we have here last week?
Thank you, Mihaela. As we all expect in any technology, there are requirements of different people's different specializations. So when we come to blockchain technology, there are a number of specialization which we can cluster them together. It requires, for instance, people who are specializing in computer engineering, that they have to deal with all matter of devices which are needed to support the whole concept, like supercomputer, distributed networks. We also need computer scientists, people who are specializing in algorithms, and like the way we know that blockchain basically is a data science. It's a combination of distributed network and the issues of encryptions. So in the encryption,
usually they have mathematics, physics.
They have mathematicians, and we know computer scientists is a combination of mathematics and the issue of the computer science. But the biggest innovation is into the third cluster of IT technologists, so we can call them blockchain technologists. That's where the biggest innovation is done and what we have seen. Like the way all have said, what have made the blockchain popular basically is the Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, if we look at in an overview way, is an innovation in the area of finance. But we know now there's an innovation in the other sectors, innovation in agriculture, innovation that support in a transportation system, in the area of provenance. So basically, if we can relate with the event that we had last week, we'll see that we're having a number of people who are fitting in that framework that I've explained. And the biggest interest is coming from the aspects of technologists, so we can put, and also actual users that they are using these services that we are talking about, that they utilize blockchain. Of course, there's other aspects which are very important to be careful with, like security and other things. But basically, the framework is involving those three groups that I've explained.
But then these are kind of people whom one needs to distinguish when you have in a room or you go to a huge conferences which are happening. In the CPTM context, we have these networks overlapping.
Absolutely.
But they are, as far as possible, more coming from the technology, digital.
Absolutely.
And probably there is a need for some computer science, computer engineering there.
Yep.
But then there are those who are users,
Yep.
And those are from central banks,
Yeah.
whatever. So it's a bit easier. But then if one cannot make a distinction between somebody who has a background in technology as different from computer science or computer engineering, then you are in trouble, because everybody can speak about Bitcoin in one or another.
Exactly, especially in the realm of
or make statements without even realizing.
They need to distinguish. So I think that's the other thing, the distinguishment between, say, Bitcoin or say Ethereum here, that use different protocols. In essence, so your technologist will know the different protocols and why these different protocols may benefit over another protocol, such as a proof of work with Bitcoin and proof of stake with Ethereum. Now, you may get two specialists who are extremely good in their field, but they will not agree. But this is because they believe that their knowledge is more valid than the others. That's where actually, as an individual, you need to do a bit of your own homework. So, whereas you can bring in the specialists and they can tell you, or the technologists, and they can tell you, look, we believe this is the way forward, but it's always good to get maybe one or two different opinions on what you're listening to.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the one of the things that we did not emphasize, because it wasn't tailored that way, was, as distinct from last year, was the issue of trade.
Yeah.
And not trade as such, but just the issue of
Trade
application
finance.
of blockchain technology, and of course using maybe digital currency to that. So how would we do about it, and how would we also bring in the RegTech type of issues?
So I'd say there's two formats here really. You should concentrate on what is the exact trade and finance and the process there. So how does technology make that process more efficient? How do you get marginal gains by using this technology? How do you push those gains back down to the people on the ground who are creating this trade and finance and economy for you? Once you've got that process straight, or some knowledge around what the technologies can do for you there, then your next logical step is to look at your regulatory and compliance models. And this is where actually we see a great deal of money going into the market. as I said before, Mahela, the money used to go to the front end, the traders and the brokers, who used to get paid lots of wages. Now, if you look in London, a compliance and regulation officer will actually be able to demand a higher wage than perhaps a trader or a broker in some cases.
Not quite the sum of everybody, intermediaries, not quite.
So it's gone from the front office to the back office, because the back office is what's going to protect that bank in the end of the day. And the key with regulatory and compliance is, what technology can I use and what efficiencies can I gain there? Can I make the KYC AML process more streamlined and smooth for my corporate clients? And that is where the central banks can work with the actual corporates and SMEs to say, actually, we agree with this technology, you can use it, and it will actually help trade and finance by actually making your compliance and regulatory units more streamlined and efficient. So the two are very, how do you say, connected.
Connected.
Yeah.
And Moses, and probably then just a final overall from both of you. Moses, the fact that last year there was an immediate kind of follow-up from the former governor of Tanzania,
right,
as part of the CPTM group, Professor Beno,
right,
recognizing that is not good enough for him and all the governors to be exposed continuously to this, because they have nobody to talk to at home within the bank. I mean, they do, but there is a need for similar kind of evolution of knowledge otherwise within. Otherwise, yeah. So there was a Bank of Tanzania exercise that took place in October, where Oliver and Pete from Objectech and we dealt with.
right.
But were we to go, not where to go, were we, for instance, to respond to the immediate request I had this morning from Cameroon in Yaoundé? Because you see, in Yaoundé, where we went about 3 years ago, by the way of the Vision 2040,
Right.
and where we avoid it all the time to refer to the document of Vision 2040, but instead we discussed about the various processes that make that happen.
Right.
And that there was Ministry of Finance or Planning or Standards and so on. But Boniface, the representative of the government from the President's office, said that Yaoundé 2, really implementation, carrying forward that vision, is related now to the combination of the governor with the statistics, with the standards, and we should do that if we can, to explain to them the kind of things that, without being just a workshop or just a conference.
Mihaela, the point that you've said is making real sense. And if we are going to use the same framework of CPTM, especially when we do global dialogue, where we work in a big summit where everybody is involved, and then we work in small groups where we can focus our discussion. So basing on that framework, it really makes sense that to replicate the event that we had in the Bank of Tanzania to other places. So responding to the request that you got from Cameroon, it really makes sense to have a mini dialogue, if you can say, or an event which is smaller, dedicated to Cameroon.
Well, it's actually a kind of think tanking in a national context.
In a national context.
Without necessarily television and so on. Just people feel freely to say what, like we did last week. Okay. Oliver, what do you see as the signals, key signals, that we were able to, not in any order, we were able through the discussion, not just from you.
I think there was a clear signal from the Honourable Minister, was it
Namibia?
On Busiko made a very good point, and you made the point just a couple of minutes ago, that it can't be all put on the central bank governors. You need people like the Minister of Trade. You need the Minister of Finance. They need to work and communicate as hubs themselves and distribute their knowledge amongst one another. That's where the technologies and they can see the true gains. if the ministries remain uncommunicative with one another, then the technologies themselves are worthless, in my opinion.
So that's one signal.
The connection,
Any
so
other?
the constant connection, and
that's
then I thought another signal was for better hubs actually between the African countries themselves, so they can begin to share knowledge. As I know, there's a few initiatives going on, and then really just to not to look at what's going on in, say, perhaps like Sweden at the Riksbank, and say realize that it's actually just an experiment. And for instance, the Riksbank has stated that any type of digital currency will only be a complement to cash. They are not looking to eliminate cash, and I think that's very important when we send signals and knowledge out, that we're very exact on what we say and hold ourselves to very high standards on passing certain information along.
These are some of the signals.
Yeah, and I think the other signal is...
Business-wise, what signal had you got?
Business-wise, I would say that there's great applications for trade and finance.
It's just confirmed.
Very much confirmed, and I believe that actually the other signal was on. There's a great opportunity here for regulation technology, RegTech as we call it, and I think that this is where a lot of the central banks could really benefit in the modernisation of systems through technology to actually give themselves better efficiencies.
For Know Your Client and all the rest of it.
Know Your Client, anti-money laundering, the whole lot.
That may be one of the things that we may follow more.
Yep.
Okay. And you're flying to China like next week?
In 2 weeks, yeah.
In 2 weeks, okay. Okay, we won't go into detail there.
I can tell you when I go
Tell
back.
us when you go back.
Mihaela, one of the signals that I've captured there is to broaden the application
You couldn't have just captured one.
Yeah, in addition to what Oliver said, is to look at the big picture of the possibilities of blockchain, not only to concentrate on the so perceived threats of the Bitcoin, but to look at other innovation that they are going to help, for example, reduce the cost of the transactions used in a trade and finance, the issue of the provenance industry that apply basically in all sectors, and the other areas. And also we emphasize on the capacity building to make sure that they look at what we have discussed today, to find that when a decision maker is making a decision on the issue of the blockchain, to get the inputs from the engineers, scientists, and technologists, not only to enthusiasts and technologists alone.
Which of the three are you more interested yourself?
As an engineer.
Is a computer engineer.
And
but you're aware about
also,
the science and
the science. Yes.
Okay.
I can fit in all.
So is that the reason
framework.
why they ask you to go back like tomorrow morning and come back like Friday? Yeah?
Something
Tanzania.
like that. Yeah.
Okay, mother. I hope you don't mind I mentioned that. But there are the question is that one of the signal that was very loud and clear was that one does require a distinction between the people who need to whom all these things are being applied, and the people who are actually pushing for this, for developments.
Exactly.
And unless the two are together. And the other very clear signal was that, be it Swaziland Central Bank or Bank of England, they established a fintech hub,
which is a very good innovation, actually.
In the same context. And I suppose we had quite a lot to do with the idea of the governor wishing to have a point of reference in the bank. Well, the other thing that it was very clear to me was that by probably next year or so, the value of what is taking place needs to be more and more measured in the way that is useful to be measured.
Yep.
And that is referred, all this measuring, to the national statistics, which I don't think it should, because I don't think anybody would wait for National Statistic Office to agree on a definition of a new measure of a statistics for which you go ahead and do business. Yeah, there will be an emerging kind of new factual and therefore visualization, but different from even what has been talked about it last week, is the visualization which is animated, which requires adaptive visualization all the time, so to speak. So to catch up what you're saying and you're thinking probably, you're thinking while we're talking.
Yes.
In various things and try to combine some with Moses.
Exactly.
So all these things are not possible to be expressed unless either there is a dialogue of an interest
Exactly.
or Anyway, just to yesterday, we were talking about this measure of new type of statistics, which Jonathan Athau and David Hand and Rebecca Riley brought in last week Thursday about the rate setters faced by shake-up of GDP statistics. Yeah? And this is what Rebecca Riley was talking about, the head of the new research unit set up by National Statistics.
Right.
There is a need for new statistics. I'm not very sure that they will be able to catch up with the kind of business that you are involved in.
There may be some time transitional period where they are catching up, but then obviously as our technology becomes better, their technology will become better also and more able to have real-time statistics, in my opinion.
Actually, the only reason why I wanted to bring that in is because I thought Moses, one doesn't need to go into it now, could say, well, wait until quantum computing is coming in, everything will be sorted out. So that's for me the final signal.
I mean, we need another session to discuss more the implication of quantum computing
But what is the difference between the quantum computing and that's all? Quick.
In the simplest way, in a quantum computing world,
as different from
the issues of encryptions are going to be irrelevant because everything is going to be easily can be broken down.
So we have to
like
wait
the way it is now.
until the application of quantum computing is becoming real.
Yeah, and then the mass adoption of it. I mean, everyone says quantum computing is not as far away as we think, but I think mass adoption of actually being able to afford a quantum computer is quite far away.
It's quite far away.
Yeah.
The only thing was that is a digital infrastructure type of issue, like people were also discussing a few years ago about artificial intelligence and or supercomputers and so on. So I think probably we should discuss separately about these issues because, well, people say that they cost a lot and they are in the future, both developmental and otherwise. In fact, they are built into what is...
But it's also the knowledge, Mahela, this is the cost of knowledge, so like training people who can actually teach this and actually get people into this field. That's where you how do you distribute that knowledge and get lots of people educated in this field? It's a lot. That's the hard part, actually.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Finally, I think on behalf of Omar, the chairman, who I talked this morning, and a few directors, in addition to those who were here, like Omar Motibasela and Andrew and Professor Sam, thank very much to Oliver. Your time means money and the other way around, but it seems that we attracted you into our own, and thank you very much to pick up what is correct, what is not correct. And as usual, Moses, everybody refers to you to confirm that it is or is not true, not only what Oliver says, but what anybody else says. So thank you very much.